Hi guys, it's Blackie for Shaman's Forge Witchcraft, and today we're going to talk a little more in depth about fire tech. Now this is something I normally do in my classes when I'm actually teaching someone about fire. Last night, giving an example, we're going to talk about cold weather fire building and what some of the dynamics are with that. So last night here in my part of the South, the temperature was 32 degrees and the humidity was 88% at about midnight. Now if I'd had to build a fire right then, the saturation of moisture around you, yes, it feels cold, but how it fights us in the process of trying to build a fire. What you're seeing, and we're going to imagine that this is a match burning. Let me zoom in on that a little bit. Okay, let's assume that this is our match. Here's the stick, here's the flame. If we could look at it under a microscope while it's burning, you would see this all the way around that flame. Probably not so much at the top, but definitely around all the sides like that. And what that is would be the water in the air actually boiling away from the heat, because it only has to be 212 degrees for water to boil, and that flame is several hundred degrees. Now what this does in effect is put a shield around that flame. The heat can come out no farther than that before it reaches to that boiling point. The heat can't pass past that and be beyond 212 degrees. Otherwise the water out here would boil as well. So you see what I'm saying? It's almost like a shield all the way around that, and you've got a column of heat going straight up, but all the way around that flame, 360, is like a curtain of boiling water, and that is robbing heat. So with it robbing the heat away from that flame, it has a limited distance. We will call this area between or inside of that thermal area the combustion temperature, the combustion area. Okay? Now it's very small. And as this moisture is evaporating, as this moisture is boiling and constantly being replaced by fresh to boil, it's robbing heat. And so it's limiting the amount that this heat can spread. Now you've seen this whenever you've gone to build a fire and everything looks good and you get it ignited and the fire starts spreading just a little bit and it just goes out. What happened? What happens is as that heat begins to radiate out on your flammable material, it's getting further and further away, and that moisture dampness is robbing it of its ability to maintain one of the three legs. And the three legs are heat, fuel, oxygen. We're missing heat. Heat is being lost at such a rate, or dampened down at such a rate, that as it begins to spread out, it's losing the heat. Too much of that cold and wet is coming in, and it drops below the combustion point. It just simply goes out like a fuse fizzling out. So when we're building our fires, this is when we need that flame source that's going to keep going, like that sliver of fat lighter, like a Bic lighter, like a candle. Some form of flame producing material that's going to burn for several minutes. Now if you look back in my earlier videos, I did a thing called fire straw, and it's how taking a Vaseline soaked cotton ball and putting it into a straw. That gives you 8, 10, 12 minutes of flame to keep the process going, feeding it back in to keep that combustion area. Now how this applies to us, we have created a tinder bundle, and are actually a bird's nest. What is the difference? A tinder bundle is a bunch of sticks that a raw flame is going to ignite. A bird's nest is fine hair-like material that's going to catch a cold. But in such cold conditions, a tinder bundle or a bird's nest, the bird's nest holds a better chance. Why? It's because, back to my little thing right here, you've got your flame and heat source, and now instead of me just putting right over the top just a few little pieces like that, my big old bird's nest is going to do this. and it's going to be all this material out here on the side. This is going to effectively weaken this water shield, this evaporation shield. It's robbing it of the influx of new moist air. Now it's holding the heat better. That BTUs of energy is not being just lost to the environment. It's being captured, and as it moves, it's being transferred to the next flammable material, those fibers. The next one, the next one, the next one, the next one, instead of just being lost to the environment. By doing this, I'm capturing that heat, and I'm letting that heat swell up and grow. Now, once I get this combustion area bigger, let's say about the size of a basketball, I've constantly fed. One of the biggest mistakes that I see with people building a fire in these kind of wet, cold conditions, so we've created a pocket of hot air, of combustion chamber area inside of our bird's nest. Now that heat's going to come up and radiate out. Now I go to put my sticks on it, and the biggest mistake I see people do is they forget to strip the bark off. If it's been raining and it's wet, that bark is just a wet paper towel wrapped around the wood. It must therefore dampen down the heat, and in the cold conditions, heat is the thing we're trying to hold on to. So we want to strip the bark with the back of our knife off of as much as we can at the beginning. We grow this bed of coals. Until we get a bed of coals, it's about the size of a basketball. Even better, once you get the size of a beach ball, you're pretty much self-contained. Now I can add wood to it and not have to strip the bark because there's enough thermal mass there that it evaporates the moisture. What is smoke? Smoke is unburned gases that are being forced out of the wood. And it's coming up, and before it can reach the combustion temperature, it's outside of the heat column and it forms smoke. If you build a big enough fire, and now this normally takes several hours to build, but you see this a lot in the winter campfires. You've got some really good firewood and you start adding it to it, and you get this bigger and bigger bed of coals. That's why you get like a car tire bed of coals going on, and you don't have flame. Well, what's happened is now you've got to the other end of this dynamic, and you're starving it for oxygen. When that happens, you can keep adding all the wood you want, and it'll flame up for just a minute, and then the flames go out. And you feel heat off of it, but not at a great distance. Flames produce the heat that radiates the farthest out. So we want that column of flame. Now, if you'll take a handful of pine straw and throw on it, whoosh, you got flames like that, and you feel heat 10 feet out, and then that dies down, and now you only feel heat out to about 4 feet. This is good when I'm laying in my hammock underneath a tarp shelter in the winter. I want that deep bed of coals producing that kind of slow, radiant, very, very little smoke heat, where I can just keep adding a couple of big pieces to it, and it keeps the cycle going. And I'm close to the fire. I'm not very far away. But if I want the light, the heat, and I want the heat to project, now I have to do what's called raising the fire. That means I've got my bed of coals. I want to rake those coals up in a good pile. And I want to put 2 pretty good sized logs on either side of it, just like I'd be making a hunter's cook fire or something. And then I want to pile smaller stuff up on top. What I've effectively done there is I have moved the combustible material up in the heat column, because that car tire size pile of hot coals, oxygen can't get into the middle of it. It's being robbed at the edge. It's reached the combustion point and it's robbed of oxygen in the middle. By pushing them together and putting 2 barriers and lifting up one end of the log and sticking a stick under it, commonly called a damper stick, it will allow air to flow underneath and to feed that fire. Now, by building fires on top, I get a column of light. I get a column of flame, because that combustible gases that's coming up is igniting and producing heat that radiates out farther. That's the basic idea of it. Hope this gives you some ideas, guys. Please leave any questions or comments below. And if there's anything I can do for you, please ask. Till next time, I'm Blackie for Shaman's Forge Woodscraft. Wishing you safe journeys. Have a great day, guys.